It didn't make even enough of an impression upon him to mention in his initial round of questioning. It was just kind of along the list of things and headlines that he scrolled through, something he happened to see. And this third one said he absolutely could set that aside. What the defense is asking for is not a presumption of prejudice. He's asking for a presumption from this court that the jurors, the prospective jurors who he's questioning, are lying to him. I mean, that's what he's essentially asking the court to find. Because these citizens are being placed under oath, they're raising their right hand, they're telling the court what information they've been exposed to and how that information may or may not affect them. And you can see different people have things affect them in different ways. Now, we know that there's pretrial publicity in this case, and there has been since the moment the news broke and the Facebook video was released. And it's not because of any conduct of the state or government officials. What I hear him saying is, oh my gosh, we have elected officials doing their job, right? They're making statements. They're talking to their constituents. In the case of the city, they settled a civil claim because they felt apparently they needed to do so. That the government, the state, I should say, this prosecution team, again, has absolutely no control over that, nor should we be meddling in some other instance I could see where you could find fault if we were trying to control the flow of information or the outcome of the civil case. They need to do their jobs, we need to do our jobs, and we all need to stay in our respective lanes. This is one of those situations where the cure is the saying, don't just do something, stand there. And that's what you exactly need to do here. We have a process of voir dire that we put people under oath and we ask them questions and we get their answers. And on an individual and a particularized basis, the court, in its discretion, makes the determination as to whether or not the person should be stricken for cause or not. And we're on day 6, right? In this day 6 of jury selection, of which you had 3 weeks slotted, we have plenty of time. We have, what, 329 prospective jurors have been identified in this case. And we're through, what's the number we're through now? We're below 100. We have plenty of time. We have plenty of people. We can take all the time questioning that we need to determine on an individual and particularized basis whether there's prejudice to the defendant or a need to strike people for cause. That just hasn't borne out so far, and I don't think that we should overreact to what's been happening. This case is in the news. It's going to continue to be in the news. There will be a story about this case every single day, no matter what. That is going to happen. And what our job here is to determine whether the particular prospective jurors in the box have been exposed to media, if they have biases that they can't set aside, right? That's what our job is. But it's not to make a prejudgment as to the rest of the panel. As to the last juror, the defendant doesn't need his strike back in that particular instance because the juror did not demonstrate any reason to strike him for cause. He stated, and it was a considered opinion, and you saw him, right? I mean, you're observing him as he's talking. I understand he was masked that whole time, but the sincerity with which and the contemplativeness with which he gave his answer, that, you know, I could set that aside because that's my job, because that's my duty, and that's what I would do. And this particular juror is the one who would know a little bit about that, having previously deployed as a member of the Minnesota National Guard and knowing that sometimes things are hard, but you're supposed to do it, so you do it anyway. He stated that under oath. There is no reason to disbelieve him, and the court should deny the defendant's relief.
Well, a couple things. I probably was not as articulate as Mr. Nelson was when I mentioned the concern about the plea bargaining, the concern about the $27 million. But I pretty much said that it's going to be a quick road to a challenge for cause. Maybe, so that's saying I'm presuming prejudice in those. But I don't think I can listen to a juror who says, I can be fair and impartial. Yeah, I was aware of that. And to be honest, our last juror, I don't think he was lying when he said that settlement thing, I don't think that would affect me at all. I think it was more maybe perhaps a lack of introspection about the other firmly held beliefs that he had. He had a very negative opinion about the defendant and a variety of other things. And I don't think he was intentionally lying. I think it's true of a fair number of jurors. They just lack the introspection to say, yeah, I don't think I can be fair and impartial. Some have not. I don't think I have to accept a juror's statement, I will be fair and impartial, when everything I see, the totality of the circumstances, is they can't be. It's almost humanly impossible given the opinions they hold. And if they are confirmed that they still hold those opinions today, and they are that strong, and considering everything, I don't believe that's true. I think it's appropriate that I accept the challenge for cause. The state might push back and say, if they say you can be fair and impartial, you have to accept that. I don't think so. I think part of my job in a challenge for cause is to make a determination if they could be fair and impartial, not just did they say the magic words. So I guess I think I'm almost between the two positions here. This has always been my thought, that I have to consider everything listening to this juror, whether there is a challenge for cause or not, based on the totality, not just the words that come out of their mouth. Those are important, obviously. And if they say, I can't be fair and impartial, that's hard to say the reverse. And say, oh no, you can be, and sit on the jury. I mean, that's playing with fire.
I agree with you, Your Honor. I mean, the Court of Appeals, the appellate authority is very clear that you are in a position to look at the record as a whole, the totality, and make that determination on an individual and particularized basis whether or not you believe a cause challenge should be granted or not. And I think that's perfectly appropriate. I think you've stated exactly what the law is and what the process should be, and continue to be, and has been.
And I think, if I could just comment on the two issues that we have currently, there are more, but the two primary ones that are particularly pernicious here is the articles shortly before trial attributing the information to law enforcement officials about plea bargaining. That is particularly problematic, and I said so, because of its impact on the presumption of innocence. The $27 million settlement is unfortunate. It is something to consider. But let's face it, it's not just a legal decision, that's a political decision. And I think people realize that, and they realize that's not anybody in this room who's doing that. And so I think it is less problematic, but less problematic than the other articles that were out earlier. So when you have a combination of the two, I'm probably going to find it hard to say that that person, even if they say I can be fair and impartial, that I would buy it and not challenge it and not grant a cause challenge. But at the same time, there are certain people, I think lawyers get really good at this, about pigeonholing, okay, I know this, I can't consider this, I can consider this. I mean, when I'm a trier of fact, I'm probably exposed to a lot on a court trial. I'm exposed to a lot of evidence that doesn't come into evidence, and I have to affirmatively disregard it and just focus on what I have in front of me. I think certain professions, most importantly lawyers, are trained to do that. And so I have a lawyer up here saying that. I'd probably be more likely to say, yeah, because you've had practice doing it. If I got somebody who still holds these opinions, I think it's a case-by-case basis, totality of the circumstances. I don't think I have the authority to presume prejudice. I'll tell you it is prejudicial. Those articles are prejudicial to the defendant and his right to a fair trial. But the question is, how prejudicial is it to the point where a challenge for a cause is appropriate? So I don't think it's so much a presumption as I'm going to hear from him, I'm going to make a decision on the totality and go from there. And I'm not necessarily going to buy everything that comes out of a juror's mouth, because, and not because I'm saying they're lying. They may just be not very self-aware, and it's very clear that they are not self-aware.
I think that's perfectly appropriate. I do want to just mention, you mentioned the third degree, the plea negotiations. Of all of the jurors we've examined so far, if my notes are accurate, we've had one state that they had any sort of awareness of that out of everyone, and that person was stricken for cause. Again, that's perfectly appropriate. We have a lot of jurors to go through. We have a lot of time to go through them, and that's the process that we can use to ensure this defendant a fair trial.
All right. Mr. Nelson, anything else? Or? All right. I'm going to deny the request to reinstate a peremptory challenge, but your observations are noted, and I think they're actually consistent, but feel free to argue strenuously in certain cases, knowing that my standard is not, they said the magic words. Okay.
Understood.
All right, let's move forward then with the next jurors. Juror 71. Juror 70, I believe, is the one who was postponed their service.
They need to be the group. I don't think this group has done.
Oh, that's right. We're back to the. It's the group. We need the group. All right. Thank you for reminding me. Take any seat. All right. Thank you. You be seated. And I'm going to take this off so you can hear me for this part. Well, first of all, can you all hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay. Well, good afternoon. My name is Pete Cahill, and I am one of the judges of the District Court. And you have been summoned as potential jurors in the case of State of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin, which is a criminal case related to the death of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. A person charged with a crime has a right to a fair trial before an impartial judge and an impartial jury. In order to make sure the jurors who are selected are impartial, the law provides that the court and the attorneys for the parties may ask questions to all the prospective jurors, which must be answered under oath. And first of all, thank you for filling out and sending back the questionnaire that was mailed to you. Your contribution to the important and serious matter at hand is best served by continuing to provide us with full and complete answers to the questions that you're going to be asked today. These questions will follow up on issues from the questionnaire and possibly other topics. After the questioning is over, the attorneys will have the right to excuse some of you from service on this jury, and I may excuse others of you for what is called cause. In either case, it does not mean that you are not a fair person, and you should not take offense in being excused. Also, I ask that you not take any offense at any question that might be asked. We must pry, to some extent, in order to explore opinions you might hold and hear about experiences that you've had that might affect your ability to serve in this case. The defendant, Mr. Chauvin, has been charged with murder in the second degree and manslaughter in the second degree. Now, during the normal course of a trial, charges may be added or subtracted, but those are the charges as it stands. To these charges, the defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, which is a denial of each and every material allegation in the charges. I'm now going to have the participants introduce themselves and then ask you if you have any friendship or acquaintanceship with them, starting with the state. Mr. Slisher.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. My name is Steve Slisher, representing the state of Minnesota.
Hi, my name is Christina Marinakis, and I'm assisting with the prosecution.
Hello, my name is Keith Ellison, and I represent the state of Minnesota.
Good afternoon, Aaron Eldridge for the state of Minnesota.
And Mr. Nelson.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Nelson, and assisted by Amy Voss. Together we represent Derek Chauvin, the defendant in this case.
Thank you. Is anybody on the panel familiar with any of these people? An acquaintance, friendship? All right. Seeing no hands. In addition to the attorneys in the courtroom, other attorneys might make an appearance during this trial, specifically for the Attorney General's office. The And so I'd like to know if you know any of these names. Assistant Attorney General Matthew Frank, Jerry Blackwell, or anyone else who works for the Office of the Minnesota Attorney General. Any acquaintances or relationships? Okay, thank you. Seeing no hands. Does anybody know anyone in Mr. Nelson's firm, his law firm, or had any dealings with his office? Okay. Do you recognize anybody in this courtroom? And not recognize, but do you have a relationship with an acquaintance or a friendship, anything like that? Or working relationship? All right, no hands. Now, you've been given a list of potential witnesses. Please review it before you get questioned individually. You'll be asked if you know anyone on the list. Now, one of the things the attorneys may not do in jury selection is to instruct you on the law. But I do want you to be aware of some of the basic concepts that apply in all criminal cases so that you may keep them in mind as you answer the court's and the attorney's questions. So I will instruct you as follows. First, the charges against the defendant are not evidence, and they create no inference of guilt. No member of the jury should in any way permit himself or herself to be prejudiced against the defendant because a charge has been made against him or because he has been placed on trial. The defendant is presumed innocent of the charges made against him, and in order for you to find the defendant guilty, the state must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant does not have to prove his innocence. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant throughout the trial unless and until he has been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt according to the law and the evidence admitted at trial. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is such proof as ordinarily prudent men and women would act upon in their most important affairs. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It does not mean a fanciful or capricious doubt, nor does it mean beyond all possibility of doubt. If you serve on this jury, you and your fellow jurors will be the sole judges of whether a witness is to be believed and of the weight to be given a witness's testimony. There are no hard and fast rules to guide you in this respect. In determining believability and weight of testimony, jurors may take into consideration the witness's interest or lack of interest in the outcome of the case, relationship to the parties, the ability and opportunity to know, remember, and relate the facts, their manner, their age and experience, their frankness and sincerity, or the lack thereof, the reasonableness or the unreasonableness of their testimony in light of all the other evidence in the case, and any other factors that bear on believability and weight. If on this jury, you should rely in the last analysis upon your own experience, good judgment, and common sense. There are things you should not do during jury selection. You are not investigators. You are not to go out and do any looking, and you are not to ask people about this matter. You are not to use the internet to look for information about this case or about the law. Above all, you must not talk to anyone who is involved in the case, the lawyers, the witnesses, or spectators. Do not be offended if the attorneys, parties, or witnesses do not speak to you. They know it would be improper to contact you except through the normal jury selection process, and they will confine themselves on most occasions to a brief greeting. During the selection process, your family and friends will be curious as to what you're doing, and you should tell them that you're on a panel of potential jurors for a criminal case, and that is all you should tell them. Since that is all you should tell family and friends, that is all you should tell the general public. So, during these proceedings, please refrain from using Facebook, Twitter, or other social media to announce that you are a potential juror or to comment on this trial. You may access such social media tools, but please do not publish any information about this case or your thoughts about this case, and avoid any media coverage of this case. You do not have to stay away from people and refuse to speak to them. Do whatever you wish, but do not talk about the case, and do not talk at all to anyone who is involved. Now, because of the nature of the charges, this case is receiving media coverage. Excuse me. Do not read about the case in the newspapers or online, and do not listen to news about it on radio or television. This trial, including jury selection, is being televised, but no video of any other juror, of you or any other juror, will be taken at any time, now or during trial, if you are selected. Also, your name will not be used in the courtroom. You will only be referred to by your random number to protect your privacy. The audio of anything you say will be broadcast unless we need to discuss something deeply personal or extremely sensitive or embarrassing, or it would tend to reveal your identity. In those cases, I would specifically order the audio to not be broadcast. In that case, you'll still have to answer questions on the record, but without audio or video broadcast. The audio would be only audible in this courtroom. Now, with the exception of juror number 71, we'll have you wait in the other courtroom until your turn is called. Please go with the deputy who will escort you back there. Keep in mind, we are doing COVID protection, so keep a social distance, keep your mask on, and use the sanitizers as much as you want. All right, thank you. Juror 71, why don't you come on up here? Good afternoon. You are juror 71, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. All right, my computer just went dark. Okay. Well, good afternoon. A couple things before I turn the questioning over to the attorneys. First is we have plexiglass between us, and also you have plexiglass between you and the attorneys. The attorneys have an extra layer of plexiglass as well. I will keep my mask on throughout so that we are maintaining COVID protection. But this is enough so that if you would prefer, for comfort's sake or to be able to speak more clearly, to remove your mask at any time. I'm pretty much leaving it up to you. In either case, mask on or mask off, I need you to probably be a little closer to the microphone so that we can pick your voice up, so that everybody can hear. So, with that, I'm going to swear you in because all of your answers must be under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I will.
All right, thank you. Well, first of all, you did submit the questionnaire, and thank you for doing that. It gave us a lot of good information. Was everything true on the questionnaire?
Yes.
Any changes or additions at this time?
Not that I can think of.
Because I need you to be aware that we know the questionnaire was filled out about 2 months ago or more. And in the intervening time, you may have, on reflection, thought of things you should have added or something that was inaccurate, or maybe even your opinions have evolved since then. So essentially, I'm giving you permission to say something different than what's on the questionnaire.
I think it's accurate.
Okay. The attorneys will probably go through some specific questions, and to refresh your memory, they will usually read your answers so that you can recall and ask you maybe to expand a bit on that. They're not doing it to be disrespectful, just to kind of remind you and refresh your memory. But at this point, you're not aware of anything that needs to be changed.
No.
Okay. The questionnaire also warned you or asked you not to read any articles, avoid the media about this case, since you are a potential juror. But we understand in the months between, you may have been exposed to other information inadvertently.
Mm-hmm.
You see a headline, you hear something on the radio, and you can't turn it off fast enough. So the question for you is, did you become aware of any information about this case, related to this case, related cases, anything in the time between the questionnaire and today?
I mean, like you said, it's hard to avoid the headlines. It's everywhere.
Right.
You know, if you're listening to the radio, it can come on pretty quickly, or
Yep.
you know, the 10 o'clock news comes on at night, and it's usually the top story or whatever else. So I mean, not looking for information, but
It's there.
yeah.
Yeah, and all the jurors have been pretty clear that they try their best. It's more an inadvertent exposure as opposed to seeking out information. Do you recall the substance of anything that has come up since you filled out the questionnaire? Even about the procedures here or related cases, that type of thing.
I mean, I saw, you know, the jury selection process was starting, you know, a couple weeks ago or whatever else, when, you know, we knew the dates on the letter as well when I needed to start calling in. So, I mean, I was aware of that, obviously. I've heard talk of charges possibly being put in or out of the case. I think last week there was something about some sort of settlement. Again, not trying to listen, but
Right. Okay, and let's talk about, you mentioned charges being added or subtracted, just kind of the normal process of...
I'm not sure. I guess I heard something about a third-degree charge. I don't.
Okay.
I tried to not listen to the rest of it, but...
All right, that's good. Now, as far as the settlement, what are the details you remember?
I heard there was a monetary settlement made to the family of Mr. Floyd.
And did you hear the amount or anything?
20-some million or something like that. I don't know exactly.
Okay. Well, tell me, what do you think? Do you think that prevents you from being a juror in this case? Or should prevent you from being a juror?
I don't know that that's for me to decide.
Well, how did it affect your perception of the case, of being a juror?
Probably very little.
Okay. Specifically, the defendant is presumed innocent, like I just read. Do you think that that would impact your decision on being able to presume someone innocent? Some kind of settlement in a civil case?
I don't think those two are really related, I guess.
Okay. Well, civil case, different parties, different laws, even different issues.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, to an extent, yeah.
Okay. Do you think it'll have any impact? Kind of, if you are the balance and you are, impartial, so not tilting either way. Do you feel that may have pushed you one way or the other?
Probably not that information in particular, I guess.
Okay. Any specific information that might push you one way or the other?
Nothing since the questionnaire. Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing since I filled that out. No.
Okay. And the attorneys will probably talk to you about maybe some opinions in the questionnaire that might move you one way or the other. And so I'm going to let them talk about that. Getting back to more mundane issues, did you recognize any witnesses who were on the list?
No, I did not.
All right. And the trial is estimated to take 4 weeks once we start on March 29th. Could you make that work, personally, professionally, and otherwise?
It'd be a bit of a challenge, but yeah, I mean, I can. I do have a wedding that I'm going to out of state early in May, but...
Okay, how early?
The first Saturday, the 8th of May.
All right. We'll keep that in mind as well. Okay, I'm going to turn over the attorneys, but first let me say a couple things. You've done really good about not talking over. It's very important we have a good record so the court reporter can take everything down, that we not talk over each other. And the lawyers and I are the worst offenders. You seem to have already gotten that habit of just waiting till the end of the question and then answering, so kudos for that. That's the way we want it. The other thing is, when you're answering questions, is clearly you're sworn to tell the truth. Keep in mind that we are looking for honest answers, not the answers you think are socially desirable or what we want to hear. Because what we want to hear is your true feelings and true thoughts, and there's no failure as a juror except if you were to not tell the truth. Okay? So whatever your opinion is, we'll accept it as long as it's from the heart. Okay?
Okay.
With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Nelson as to... You may. Answer one thing. As I said, order the audio to be turned off so that it's just in this room. I think Mr. Nelson's going to ask you some other questions first, but at an appropriate time. And if we run past and you think it's time for a more private conversation, let us know. But I think Mr. Nelson kind of knows when he's going to ask for that. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience so far today. I'm going to ask you just a series of kind of general questions and then to get to know you a little bit better, and then we'll move into some of your specific responses on the questionnaire, if that's okay. And again, as the judge indicated, we understand that this was filled out quite some time ago. I'll probably read you your responses and we can go from there, okay? No one's trying to trick you. Sound good?
Okay.
All right. One thing I would ask is just because my ears are a little bad and want to make sure I can hear you, okay?
Sure.
Thanks. So let's assume you and I met in some other circumstance, a social event, a party, whatever, and we have our first conversation. What are a couple things I learn about you as I walk away from that conversation?
I'm a fun guy to be around, and very driven, involved in my career, love my family, like most people, I would assume.
Yeah.
Very involved with my family. I've got a couple of young kids, so other than that, big sports fan.
I think you talked quite a bit about your kids and in the questionnaire.
Yes.
They're younger, and you had expressed some concerns about being away from them if you were to be sequestered in this trial.
Yeah, I mean, if it's going to be any sort of lengthy period of time, yeah, it's a big concern I have, yeah.
Okay. But I assume you've had a conversation about that with your
Yes.
spouse? Okay. And you can make that work should that come up?
Yeah, it's going to, be a bit of a strain on her, and, we might have to have some support from, like, her mother, but, yeah.
Okay. And I, again, we'll chat about some of those things when we get to your questionnaire. So when you received the questionnaire and you learned that you were a prospective juror in this case, what was your initial reaction?
Wow.
All right.
Never been called for any sort of jury duty before, so it was just kind of, I won't say shocked, but surprised, like, wow,
Okay.
I was picked.
And ultimately, when you came down, let me ask you, did you have concerns about like your personal safety, or did you have concerns about COVID-19, anything like that?
Upon opening the letter?
Yeah, upon learning that you would be a juror in this case.
I mean, some concerns about my family's safety. I mean, I think this is, it's obviously a very publicized case, and there's, going to be a lot of people with an opinion one way or another on either side of whatever verdict. Would those people want to do harm to my family? I'd sure hope not, but I mean, yeah, it's in the back of my mind somewhere.
Okay. When you came to the government center this afternoon and kind of saw the fortification that's been erected, did that help alleviate some of those concerns?
I mean, I don't know that those were ever my concerns about coming in and out of the building and things like that. It's more what I need to be worried about my kids or my wife or my family at all, after this is all said and done, and, people find out, who was on the jury, and, whoever might have a motive to do something to somebody involved in it. I guess that would be my only real concern.
Okay. And obviously you're not the first person that has expressed similar concerns. Can you set those concerns aside, and focus your attention on the evidence in this case?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's going to be in the back of my head somewhere, but...
Okay. When you learned this afternoon that we're doing everything we can to protect your anonymity, did that alleviate some of those concerns?
It makes me feel better. Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to, anybody that's going to be in this position to, not be in the public crosshair, so to speak.
Sure. And if at some point your name were to be released publicly, how would that make you feel?
It makes me feel a little uncomfortable.
Okay. Can you think of a circumstance in your life where you've been called upon to resolve a conflict between two people?
Yes.
And how do you approach that situation?
Generally, I want to talk to both people individually, get their version of whatever conflict or whatever had happened, and try to ask questions to both sides and really understand, what the problem is, and then, depending on what that is, maybe bring the two sides together, or try to help talk through with each person individually, I guess, depending on whatever situation it is.
Okay. So as what I hear you saying is listen to both sides of the story, right?
Yeah.
What about talking to other third parties who may have seen
Yeah,
it?
definitely might be necessary.
Okay. And what about looking for other information that may help resolve the conflict, other than just persons?
Again, it probably depends on what conflict we're referring to, but yeah, I mean, if there's information available to help you make a good decision or the right decision, or to alleviate a conflict between two parties or try to bring them back together, it's probably usually the ultimate goal is to bring the two sides back together. So, you know, if it's a work situation, they can work together, or, you know, personal situation that they can, you know, be cordial to one another.
Okay. Now, ultimately, you understand that your role as a juror is to resolve a conflict, right?
Sure.
And conflict in a broader sense in terms of the state of Minnesota and Mr. Chauvin, but also if you were a juror, you're one of 12 voices, and conflicts may emerge in the deliberation. Do you understand that?
Sure.
So, I mean, I know you've never been in this circumstance before, but how would you anticipate kind of dealing with that second problem, conflict within the jury deliberation room?
I think it's similar. You need to understand what the conflict is. You know, why do people feel the way they do?
Okay. Can you think of a circumstance in your life where you've been asked to decide if someone is telling the truth or not? I know it's a kind of a.
I mean, I guess I don't know if that really ends up being the determinant. Like, if I'm thinking of a work situation, that's probably not going to determine anything one way or another if that person is being 100% truthful. But yeah, I mean, I think that's part of any, you know, fact-finding mission, or if you're going to, you know, hear two sides of a story. Well, I mean, there's always an opportunity that somebody might be being, you know, less than truthful, and, you know, kind of having that, just drawing on other experiences and knowledge of the situation and things like that to, you know, form your opinion if you think something is not true.
Okay. Can you think of a situation in your life where you've been 100% certain you're right and you later learn that you're wrong?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you deal with that?
Generally just gonna own that, hey, I was wrong.
Okay.
You know, hopefully I didn't say anything too harsh that I need to say I'm sorry for, but yeah, I mean, I can't think of any adult that hasn't thought that they were right about something and, you know, found out that they were wrong. So,
are you the type of person who's willing to re-examine his opinion?
sure. I mean, if facts are presented, I'm listening. Yeah.
Okay. Now, ultimately, your role as a juror is to be what's called a judge of the facts, what happened in this particular case. And at the end of the case, the judge is going to read you the law that applies to this case. And you have to kind of apply the facts to the law, okay? Would you be able to follow the law even if you thought it was wrong or should be changed?
Yeah. I mean, the law's the law, right?
Right.
We all have to follow it.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you a few questions kind of about your questionnaire. Again, I'll refresh your recollection based on some of your answers. Before I do that, I mean, do you think that you're the type of person who can look at the evidence that's presented in court and make a decision based on the evidence in court?
I believe so.
Okay. Do you think you can, or just that you would try, or?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm put in a seat, I would do my best to follow what I'm being asked to do.
Okay, fair enough. And before I go in, you said that you had seen some media since you filled out the questionnaire, and I understand it's inadvertent and people may have mentioned things in passing, or you flip on the car radio or whatever it may be, right? And one of the things was the settlement, right? You heard about that?
I did, yeah.
And you would say it has no bearing or impact on you in terms of your analysis of this case?
I would have fully expected that to be a part of this regardless of anything.
Why would you have fully expected that?
Just things that I've come to see over the course of my life. If you know, if one entity or one company or one department, whatever you want to call it, is I guess viewed as being responsible for something happening to either someone else or another company or whatever that might be, that there's generally some sort of monetary settlement to make people feel whole.
Okay. And the fact that the city made this determination, again, I mean, would it have any bearing? Would it cause you to, if you're in that deliberation room, right, and there's a dispute, let's say over guilty or not guilty, would you say, hey guys, the city already paid this huge settlement, we need to take that into consideration?
I don't think so.
Okay. Now, in the questionnaire, obviously, you had heard about this case before filling out the questionnaire. That's
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And it's fair to say you had formed some opinions about this case before filling out the questionnaire.
Yes.
And those opinions remain your opinions today?
Yes.
Okay. Now, before we go in, I want to make sure and clarify something here too, is there's a lot of questions about a video and how many times you've seen a video, and you referenced the video.
Yes.
I want to make sure we're talking about the right video, or the same video, I guess I should say. You understand there was a bystander who took a video. That video got uploaded to social media. That video went viral. The media picked up on it, and away we went, right?
Yes.
Is that the video that you are referencing?
I believe that we're talking about the same video, yes.
Have you seen any other videos about this incident, like body cameras, security cameras, anything of that nature?
No.
And I think you said you had seen that video 4 to 5 times.
That sounds right, yeah.
And when you say you had seen the video 4 to 5 times, do you mean that you had downloaded the whole video, or are you talking about clips on various other media?
No, it would be more clips. I believe it was Facebook. I watched it, at least a few minutes of it.
Okay.
Continuously running. I probably watched that, 4 to 5 minutes of it.
Okay. So
2 to 3
you
times.
watched a longer form video through social media, but then you had seen various clips.
There's
of
been clips on the news and on TV and things like that. Yeah.
Okay. Now, the first question that the questionnaire asks you is to just sort of write down the details that you were aware of this case, where you learned it, things of that nature.
Yes.
And you wrote, I watched numerous news reports and footage of the video showing the officer kneeling on his neck while he was unconscious. You remember people who were watching were asking him to stop. And then you finally wrote, the officer refusing to take his knee off the back of his neck after he was laying there unconscious are what I remember the most and are seared into my memory.
Yes.
Explain what you mean seared into my memory.
It's probably just a still shot of the officer with his, hands on his hips or hands in his pocket with his knee on the gentleman's neck back area, and he appeared to be just motionless, sitting there. It's hard to get that the look on his face, I guess, while that was going on is kind of probably that still shot that's burnt into my memory.
Okay.
As far as what I know about this.
Sure. When you say, seared in my memory,
Yeah.
do you think that has a negative or a positive connotation?
I think when you read it, it's probably a negative connotation.
I'm sorry?
I said if I was sitting in your chair, I would probably take that as a negative connotation. Absolutely.
Okay. I'm asking you about your opinion, right?
I think that word does have some feeling behind it. Yes.
Okay. You were asked about your perceptions of both Mr. Floyd as well as Mr. Chauvin. Do you remember those questions generally?
I remember there being questions about it. My exact answers,
Okay.
not certain.
So you were asked, from what you've seen, read, or heard, do you have a general impression of the defendant? And you were given some choices, and you checked the box very negative. And then what you wrote about why you felt that way, you wrote, there were protests in the city of Minneapolis causing enormous amount of damage after those events, leading to civil unrest around the country. I feel Officer Chauvin in particular took this man's life. The video shows what it shows. Right? Do you still agree with that statement?
I mean, yes, if you're asking. Yeah. That's.
I want to just tell you, sir, you are entitled to your opinion, right? And that's what we're asking you, is be honest about your opinion, right? And if you can be honest about your opinion, that will help us determine whether you can be a fair and impartial juror in this case. Do you understand that?
Yes.
So I'm not questioning your right to have an opinion, and even if that opinion is negative, but we just need you to be honest because we don't know what's in your heart or in your head.
Sure.
Fair enough?
Yes, that's fair.
Okay. So it's fair to say that you had a very strong and negative reaction to what you saw in that video, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you specifically say that my client, Officer Chauvin, took this man's life. Like you formed an opinion as to Mr. Floyd's cause of death, in other words.
That's fair to say that I made an assumption based on the video that I watched, yes.
Right. And again, the video, like what you write, the video shows what it shows.
Correct.
Now, you were asked a question about your impression of Mr. Floyd, and you said that it was somewhat negative. And you wrote, "There are stories everywhere about his colorful past and his status when the event occurred. I would not consider Mr. Floyd an admirable person based on his life choices." Do you stand by that statement as well?
Yes, I do.
Were there things that you specifically recall hearing about Mr. Floyd? About his...
I guess I've heard about drug use, trying to pass this fake bill that kind of started all the conflict. I don't know if I heard this hearsay. I don't believe I actually read anything that said this, but I heard that he had some sort of domestic altercation where he abused a female, which I guess doesn't sit well with me.
Okay. So again, you understand that you would be hearing evidence in the courtroom, right?
Yes.
And if some of that evidence didn't come in, can you set aside what you'd heard before and judge the case based on what you've heard?
I can do my absolute best.
Now, there's a question that asks, have you ever talked about George Floyd's death with your family, friends, or coworkers, discussed it online, for example, social media? You checked the box yes. And you wrote, "My only real feeling is that I think it is unacceptable for one man to choke out another man and continue to do so once he is laying motionless and unconscious on the ground."
Yes, I wrote that.
And again, not questioning your perception, your belief, your perception. Again, you're entitled to it. Right? The question is, you formed very, very strong opinions, right, about Mr. Chauvin, about Mr. Floyd, about what happened, right? And so if you've made a determination in your mind already about what happened, do you think you can just set that all aside and be a fair and impartial juror in this case?
I mean, if I'm put in the spot, I would try my absolute best to do so. Yeah, I mean, you're calling it out on the front side that, I do have a preformed opinion, yeah.
Right. And we just need you, again, right or wrong, just be honest, right?
Yep.
Okay. Because throughout your questionnaire, it's fair to say you kind of made several references to not being able to kind of unsee that video.
Yes,
And
that's true.
under our principles of law, as the judge just explained them to you, and in this questionnaire, Mr. Chauvin is presumed innocent. Do you understand that?
Yes.
And it's fair to say that you formed an opinion about whether he's guilty or not guilty at this point, right?
Yeah.
And that's based on what you've seen and heard and read and all of that. And so I think in the questionnaire, when you're ultimately asked, could you presume Mr. Chauvin innocent, you wrote, no. But human nature can lead you to presume one thing or another based on the information you have. right? Do you
Correct. Yeah, I wrote that.
So, can you apply the presumption of innocence based on your prior opinions?
I can try my absolute best. What I wrote in there, that it's going to be hard to unsee that video. I mean, I witnessed it. I watched it. I did form an opinion about what I watched, and I mean, I've been very forthcoming about that from the start. I think, again, if you guys think I'm a good fit to be a juror, then would I do my absolute best to be fair? Yeah, I would.
So the question was presented in the questionnaire. No matter what you have heard or seen about this case, and no matter what opinions you might have formed, can you put all of that aside and decide this case only on the evidence you receive in court, follow the law, and decide the case in a fair and impartial manner? And you wrote yes, but there is no unseeing the video footage of the incident. I am not sure how watching it in a courtroom setting versus in my home would change my feelings about what I am watching with my own eyes.
Yes.
Again, sir, you are entitled to your opinion.
Yes.
And you're not the first person to have a strong opinion in this case, right? And I know you say you can try to be a fair and impartial juror, but we can't have it be I can try, because everybody comes in and says they can try. The question is, can you? Yes or no?
Yes. I mean, if I'm selected, I would try to come in with as much of a clean slate as humanly possible, and listen from the start.
Pardon?
I just want to clarify some of your answers. Mr. Nelson just read the answer about yes, you can decide the case in a fair and impartial manner. Yes, but there's no unseeing the video footage. Couple things, my observations from where I'm at. I think the answer is not really. But I want to make
maybe true. Yeah.
I want to make one thing real clear. That's not a cut. People have come into this case with varying levels of knowledge about the case. One juror came in and thought Mr. Floyd had been shot. So I think a function of it, it's not intelligence or anything like that, that whether you can be fair and impartial, it's not a lack of effort. It's more, sometimes it's just your exposure to the case, talking to friends, forming opinions, the strength of those opinions. And as you say, for some people, they can say, yeah, I can put it aside. Other people say, it's seared in my memory, and I don't see how it would really make a difference. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. And I don't want you to think that if the answer is not really, that's an insult by any means. It's just, it's a fact or it's not. Which do you think is the more likely answer? Is it yes or not really to being fair and impartial? And again,
I mean, with 100% honesty, yeah, I mean, I would have to overcome that opinion coming into the situation.
sure. And can you? Or more importantly, will you?
I mean, again, I try as hard as I possibly could. I mean, when I hear his name or I hear anything to do with this case, it just seems to be one picture that pops into my head. And whether that's right or wrong, I'm just, that's my honest.
Okay. You have any further questions?
No, Your Honor.
State, have any questions?
Yes.
Mr. Slisher?
Can we make
As to this issue, Your Honor?
As to this issue? Yes, as to this issue. Sure, we can go on sidebar. We'll get right back to you. Hold on. I'm going to actually have you step out with the deputy back into the other courtroom just for a second so we can talk without having to try and
Okay.
have this thing whining in our ears. All right, we are outside the hearing of the jury. Mr. Nelson, did you want to talk? Who asked for the sidebar? Mr. Slisher.
Your Honor, and I just wanted to point out, given the nature of the challenge and how carefully we're looking at these individual jurors, I think Mr. Nelson I can't be fair and impartial. That really isn't the question at all. There are two parts to this, right? There's what happened, and then there's what happened means. And on that, this juror was unequivocal when he said, the law is the law, I'm going to follow the law. And so in this instance, the juror stated that he saw, really out of context, a segment of a video which was disturbing. And I think that, most people would find it such. Right? It's a disturbing thing to see. But the question isn't whether it's disturbing, and the question isn't whether you're going to be able to unsee it. The question is whether, if the judge instructs you, based on his instructions, you find that what you saw, that what you thought was disturbing, was actually justified under the situation because it was an authorized use of force, would you follow the law? Right? I mean, of course, if someone saw a video of a shooting, they would probably find that pretty disturbing and pretty outrageous. Of course they would. But of course, as the judge as you know, officers can, in the proper circumstances, shoot someone, kill someone, strike someone, restrain someone. They can. So the question isn't whether, when you see some conduct, whether you can forget it. The question is whether, under these circumstances, if the judge instructed you that the elements of the offense are thus, and you found that what you saw doesn't add up to a crime, would you be able to do that? And he clearly said that he would. He's not going to be able to unsee what he saw. Nobody can.
He said he would try, and we're back into the I'll try. And if you think I'm the best, that delegation to us, if you think I'm good enough, I'll try. And it's just, that's not good enough, I'm sorry.
He was pretty affirmative, I think, before we got to the third or fourth time he's asked the same question. I mean, I think that he was. And I guess what I'm saying is that the laying out of the conduct that everybody finds outrageous, and looking at that, saying, well, gosh, do you think he's guilty based on that? Without the rest of it, if you were given instructions as to what constitutes an offense and you found that this conduct doesn't constitute an offense, would you be able to vote not guilty? That's really the question. The biased juror would be one who would say, I don't care what the law says. Based on what I saw, there's no way I could acquit the defendant.
So they have to be expressly adopting that position.
No, I mean, Your Honor, you in context.
Well,
right?
let me just ask you straight out. Do you think, if you were the finder of fact, that you would find that he, in fact, will be fair and impartial?
At this point, Your Honor, as a finder of fact, I would want to develop the record more, and that's why I would like to ask him a few questions. I don't think that I could make the finding either way at this point with what the record is, but I do think it's important that we look at both parts of it, right? Here's what you saw. Now let's talk about whether or not you could look at what you saw and still be fair and apply the law. I think that's the ultimate question, and I would like to do that.
I'll give you the opportunity.
I appreciate that.
All
Thank
right.
you, Your Honor.
Judge, I would just note the second half of his response to that, which was, I am not sure how watching it in a courtroom setting versus in my home would change my feelings about this.
All right, let's bring him back.
Should I just go back up there, Judge?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
And it's only as to this.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we have you walk a prescribed route so that you don't get on the camera. All right, Mr. Slisher's going to ask you a few questions.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, Steve Slisher, represent the state. We met briefly just earlier, and I have a few follow-up questions I need to ask you just about some of the answers that you gave in response to counsel's questioning and the court's questioning about your ability to set aside prior opinions that you may have formed and judge the case fairly. All right? And so what I need to ask you, at one point you indicated that you believe that you could follow the law because the law is the law. Is that right?
Yes.
And you have no hesitation about that.
Correct.
Now, I want to pose to you a question in your ability to do that. Let's say that the court instructed you that the defendant is charged with particular offenses, particular crimes. And those crimes have elements. And the government has the burden of proving each of those elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Would you be able to hold the government to its burden of proving each element of a crime beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yes.
Now, what if, based upon your review of the court's instructions, you determined that the thing you saw, the video, right, that conduct does not constitute a crime as instructed? In other words, the government failed to meet its burden of proof. Even if, assuming what you saw was introduced as evidence, that in and of itself, that is not a crime, would you be able to return a verdict of not guilty? Or do you find the conduct such that you would just be unable to follow the judge's instructions?
Again, if I'm put in this situation, I'm going to do everything that I can be to be fair and listen to everything that's presented in front of me, and try to put aside any personal opinions that I have formed to this point.
And so on that question, and this is really important because the state has an interest here, and the state also has an interest in making sure the defendant has a fair trial, okay? And so when you say you try your best, say if you were flying a plane, if you were a pilot, and I was about to hop on the plane, and I said, "Is this plane going to land in Phoenix safely?" And you said, "Well, I'll try my best." You could see that I might want to go back to the Sky Lounge and wait for somebody else, right?
Sure.
So, I need to ask you, more than try, would you be able to? If, after reviewing the judge's instructions, it became apparent to you and you believed that what you saw does not add up to a crime, would you be able to find the defendant not guilty?
Yes, I mean, if I'm put in this situation where you're asking me to be fair and judge and listen to everything in front of me, I would listen to all the facts and do as I'm instructed and arrive at whatever verdict the facts bring us to.
And if that verdict was not guilty, would you enter it?
Yes.
I have no further questions.
So Nelson, you can resume.
So I think you're kind of seeing that we ask you the same questions in multiple ways to get to kind of an end result.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right? And again, it was pointed out to me that I may have asked you or read you a question wrong, and so I just want to clarify the record here in this regard, not trying to belabor the point. The question reads, under our system of justice, defendants are presumed innocent of the criminal charges against them. Would you have any difficulty following this principle of law? And that's what you answered no to. And you wrote, but human nature can lead you to presume one thing or another based on the information you have. Right?
Correct.
And so I guess, and then I'll move on from here, is there were several spots in this questionnaire that were asking you about, can you be fair and impartial? Can you apply the presumption of innocence? Is there any information that would make you, that we should know about you to make sure you're fair and impartial? And at each and every one of those opportunities in the questionnaire, you answered the question, but you followed it up with, but I can't unsee what I have seen, and I'm not sure how anything else would change my opinion.
Yes, I think that's fair.
Right? There was a question that said, is there any other reason you could not be a fair and impartial juror in this case? If yes, please explain. And you wrote, no, but I have watched the video and I have an opinion about what I watched and witnessed with my own eyes.
Yes.
And so it is, you're telling us now that you can, despite having every opportunity, and being asked this question 100 different ways to Sunday, right? You can just now set that aside.
It's going to take effort on my part. I don't make two ways about that. However, if I'm called to be in this position, I'm going to do everything in my ability to, uphold my civic duty and, be as fair and listen to everything that I can. Now, having said that, we do have an opinion that I formed that I need to overcome and try to set aside before I sit down in this setting. Yeah, I'm wrestling with it in my head currently. I can't paint another picture. Do I think that if, I walk out of here and you say, we want you to be the juror, yeah, I do everything I can to listen to what's presented to me once this starts.
Yeah, and ultimately that's what the presumption of innocence is, right? It's starting from a point that we don't have to overcome any of that. Do you understand that?
Yes.
And that's what I'm concerned about here, is your ability to overcome that. And I'm not questioning your honesty. I really appreciate your honesty, right? If it's the system is set up that the defendant is presumed innocent, that's the starting point. It's not the starting point of I now have to overcome your preconceived notions.
Sure.
Right? Can you apply the presumption of innocence?
Yes, I could.
Now, you were asked some other questions about kind of your availability and your family situation, and you had some different responses than you've kind of said today. Would you recognize that?
Yeah.
I mean, this morning or this afternoon at the beginning of this, the judge asked you some questions about your availability and would you want to be a juror on this case because of your work situation, right? And you said you'd make it work,
I
right?
could make it work. I don't believe he asked me if I wanted to be a juror on the case.
Okay. So there was a question in the questionnaire about the length of the trial starting on March 29th and going about 4 weeks. And you wrote, I have a very demanding job and it would cause stress on my employer. Plus, I am a very involved father of 2 toddlers. My family and wife depend on me being able to watch our children. My wife not being able to work her part-time job would cause financial stress as well.
Potentially. I mean, we could overcome that, but it is going to be, something I'm going to have to deal with on the side of this. Yes.
And then they asked the question about being sequestered, the possibility of being sequestered, and you wrote, I would not like to be separated from my wife and 2 small children.
I would prefer not to.
Now, there is the last 3 questions on the questionnaire where the court asks, or the questionnaire asks, is there anything else the judge and attorney should know about you in relation to serving on this jury? And you wrote, no, I'd prefer not to be a juror on this case. It then specifically asks you, do you want to serve as a juror on this case? You check the box, no. And then, why do you feel that way about serving as a juror? You wrote, I feel like there will be a ton of media attention around this case. I am aware that it will be televised and most likely be a very historic and documented case. I feel there will be individuals that, regardless to the outcome of this case or verdict, that are going to have a problem with the verdict. I have a family to care for, and I do not want to need to fear for the safety of my wife and 2 children or myself simply for being involved in such a charged case. Right? Yes. So I need to be confident, right? I mean, because your answers in your questionnaire are much different than your answers today in terms of, can you be fair and impartial? Are you concerned about being away from your family and the financial stress? And I just want to make sure that all of these things, that you feel you can be fair and impartial.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of walked through the whole scenario leading up to this. I realize you're asking me the question, the same question in another way. If I'm put in the situation where I would be a juror, would I be able to make it work with my home situation, my job, everything like that? Yeah, I could make it work. Would it be, I don't know if inconvenience is the right word, but would it, put me in a bit of a predicament as far as, juggling a few of those things and, potentially still having some other responsibilities to take care of outside of what's going on here? I mean, yeah, I'd be lying if I told you another story.
Okay.
We're going to take our afternoon recess.
We're going to get started back to that courtroom, and then we'll convene in 20 minutes. I'll expect a motion at that time. You have a motion?
I do. If I may have just a moment, Your Honor.
I don't need argument, I just need a motion.
Motion to strike for cause.
I'm going to grant that motion. I think both sides have had plenty of opportunity to rake this juror over the coals. I am incorporating findings from the questionnaire as well. Everyone in this courtroom is a very talented lawyer and can probably lead a juror down a path one way or the other, and that's both sides, to their desired result. My job is to figure out whether or not the person can truly be fair and impartial. I think actually this is, in fact, I'm wondering if Mr. Nelson, I'm not going to ask you to respond, if you made the earlier record and motion seeing that this individual is coming up. Because I think it is the classic case of someone who, in all sincerity, is saying he would try and be fair and impartial. But every entry in his questionnaire that's related to the presumption of innocence and being fair and impartial is a qualified answer. Specifically, the question which over defense objected, I bolded in the questionnaire, no matter what you have heard or seen about this case and no matter what opinions you might have formed, can you put all that aside and decide this case only on the evidence you receive in court, follow the law, and decide the case in a fair and impartial manner? Yes, but there's no one seeing the video footage of the incident. I am not sure how watching it in a courtroom setting versus in my home would change my feelings about what I am watching with my own eyes. Further on, and the state, I accept your argument that there are two issues here. One is what happened, and then what is the interpretation of it. The problem is when we get to that second issue, there is further equivocation. Specifically, it was a discussion of intent. I've lost my place on it. In response to question 6, had talked to family and friends. His response was, my only real feeling is I think it's unacceptable for one man to choke out another man and continue to do so once he is laying motionless, unconscious on the ground. So he actually did give an opinion that went beyond just what he saw, but what his opinion and evaluation of what that was. But my biggest concern here is that all the answers on the presumption of innocence and fair and impartial, they're all qualified, and this, I think, is a classic case that Mr. Nelson's talking about. He gives what is ultimately the socially desirable answer, but it's always qualified by, I'll try. Finally, if you can put the words in his mouth as, or I shouldn't say that, but if you can lead him to the point of saying the magic words, it's not enough in my view. I make a finding that he could not be fair and impartial, and thus I'm granting the challenge for cause. Let's go to juror number 73.
Your Honor.
Mr. Slisher, you wish to make a record?
Just very briefly, Your Honor.
Yes.
Well, obviously, I disagree with the ultimate decision.
Sure.
This is clearly within your discretion, and I understand how you got there. I, just on behalf of the state, deeply appreciate you allowing me to further question the juror and be careful here because it is so important.
And I have no problem with the state seeking to rehabilitate. So don't feel cautious in asking for that. And I'll be real honest. I think I reached this point when I turned to him and said, can I translate as yes, but to not really? And he almost kind of agreed with it. But I think that was the turning point for me. But the state always has a right to rehabilitate. Do not feel shy about asking for it.
I appreciate that.
All right. Juror number 73, please.
Do we need to excuse him?
They will. Mr. Schaefer will take care of it. Good afternoon, sir. Come on up. Have a seat.
Thank you.
First thing I'm going to do is swear you in because all your answers have to be under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right, thank you. A couple things. We have plexiglass in front of you, plexiglass between us. The lawyers have an extra layer of plexiglass between them. My point being that with all those precautions, you can actually take off your mask if it would be more comfortable.
Perfect.
Okay, there we go. A couple of things I want to ask you before I turn it over to the attorneys. First of all, you filled out a questionnaire. Thank you for doing that. Is there anything, or first of all, is everything true in that questionnaire?
Yes.
All right. Now, is there anything you wanted to add or subtract from that questionnaire?
I don't think so. It's been
Okay.
a while.
Yeah, and it's been a few months, and we realize that in the months that have intervened, sometimes maybe in reflection you think, oh, I should have added this, or
Right.
or maybe even an opinion has evolved. So
Yeah.
if there is anything like that, it usually comes up when the lawyers are asking you specific questions, and they will usually read your answers because to refresh your memory, not to be disrespectful or question the legitimacy of anything you said, but just to refresh your memory. But right now, there's nothing particular you can think of to add or subtract.
Nope.
Okay. The questionnaire did advise you not to read any articles, to avoid media, but in the months that have followed filling out the questionnaire until today, which is a fairly long time, it's normal sometimes that people are inadvertently exposed
Yeah.
to more information about the case, a headline, a blurb on the TV news, maybe a friend says, hey, did you hear about what's going on?
Right.
And we told you, don't tell anybody you're a potential juror, so you can't really stop people.
Correct.
Did you learn any new information between the questionnaire and today about the case, or cases that are related to this one, or the lawyers, parties, anything at all?
No, not that I can think of.
All right. Did you hear anything, for example, about any pending civil litigation? That might be-
Yeah, I heard about the judgment for $27 million.
The settlement that it
Yeah.
did? Okay. Well, it's not part of this case. It's
Right.
involves different parties, different law. But the fact that it was the Floyd family in the city of Minneapolis, how do you think that's going to affect or tilt you, if at all, one way or the other in this case?
I don't think it'll affect me at all. I was thinking about that after it came up. I thought it was kind of odd that it was the timing of it all, I guess.
Okay. In what way was it? Did you think it was odd?
I don't know. I thought in the past that it always had been maybe after.
So it was odd before a criminal trial?
Correct.
Do you take anything of it? Do you infer things from hearing about that?
No, I don't. It doesn't affect me at all.
Okay. Any other items that come up in your mind? Maybe some pretrial matters in this case or anything like that?
Nope.
Okay. The whole point here is whatever you've heard outside the courtroom, you get, and whatever opinions you may have formed, and just about everybody in this case knows something about what went on. Some accurate, some not so accurate. You have to put aside that knowledge and any opinions you may have formed and just decide this case on the evidence in the courtroom and the laws I give it to you. Do you think you could do that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Did you recognize anybody who is on the witness list?
I did not.
All right. Now, like the trial, there were some concerns in your questionnaire, I think, about the length being 4 weeks long.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, I'm self-employed, so it'd be a financial strain on my family for me to take that much time off.
Okay.
I,
Having said that, everyone bears a certain burden doing jury
Yep,
duty,
I understand. We'll figure it out.
but at the same time, we have to be sensitive to people's individual situations. Do you think that it would be such that, well, for one thing, would you try and be working after hours, after court time, or anything like that?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Do you think it would be to the point where you would be worn out and falling asleep during the trial?
No, I have a business partner and an assistant that can help out.
Okay. Do you think it's a large enough hardship that you would want to be off? Not want to be, but should be off the jury?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that, and that's a tough call. I would think it would be financially difficult
Okay.
if it was 4, 6, 8 weeks, whatever it is.
Well, we're hoping it's 4. But
All right.
that's a pretty good estimate, but we don't know how deliberations will go. So, well, I think maybe we'll let you think about that and get back to it. I might let the lawyers explore that a little more.
Got it.
Anything else? Any other questions you have or things you think that I should bring up?
No.
Okay. A couple of things before I turn it over to Mr. Nelson is you've done a really good job of not talking over me, but lawyers and judges and jurors sometimes talk over each other in this process. We are actually the worst offenders.
Mm-hmm.
And you seem to have pretty much been good at waiting till the question is finished and then answer it. That's necessary so that we have a good record being made. So if you could continue to do that, that would be great. And if you could pull up to the microphone so we can hear you really well. The microphone doesn't move very well, so I apologize for that.
All right.
So with that, Mr. Nelson, you may inquire as to Juror 73.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hello.
Thank you for your patience this afternoon. What I'd like to do is kind of ask you some general questions, get to know you a little bit, and then we'll circle back and follow up with some questions on your questionnaire. All right?
Sounds good.
So if you and I were to meet under much different circumstances, some sort of a social event or party, what are a couple things I'd learn about you during our initial conversation?
Well, right off the bat, I don't know, that I've been married for 23 years and have 3 kids.
Okay. Your kids in their teenage years?
No, I have all adult children.
All adult children. Boys or girls?
A boy and 2 girls.
Okay. And I know it's in here, but without going back and,
Right.
just it's easier to ask sometimes. So you received a packet of information, and when you received this packet of information, I'm assuming you learned that you were a prospective juror in this particular case.
Correct.
Right? And obviously you had heard about the case before you received this, right?
Correct.
So when you learned that you were a prospective juror in this case, what was your initial reaction?
That I didn't really want to be involved.
Okay. And that's a fair and honest answer, and I appreciate that. Were you concerned about like physical safety? Was it COVID-19 stuff, or was it more just, I don't want to have anything to do with this because it's too high profile?
No, it has nothing to do with safety or COVID or anything like that. It's more what we were discussing a few minutes ago about the financial part, because I knew it would be a long trial and how I would work through that.
Sure. And maybe we can just skip some of my other general questions for a second, and let's talk about that, because maybe it's a short order type of a situation. Okay?
Got it.
So obviously we recognize that jury service is an inconvenience for all involved. And the question ultimately becomes, is it just an undue burden or hardship to you, right? Like, if you were to be selected as a juror on this case, would you be able to continue paying your mortgage or your bills?
Yes.
Okay. And do you think it would damage your business in a tremendous way? Because I know you said you're self-employed.
Yes. Possibly. It's my busy time of year right now.
Okay.
So it'll definitely affect me.
Right. And again, without saying the name of your company, because we are trying to protect your identity, you're in real estate, I believe?
Correct.
Real estate sales, home sales, and things of that nature?
Correct.
Right. Coming into the spring, I think spring historically is a pretty big time of year for
Yes.
home sales. Obviously, the market is pretty red hot right now.
Yep.
So, is it simply, I don't mean to be glib about it, right? But is it the difference between I'm going to make some money or a whole lot of money, or is it I'm just going to make some money or no money?
Probably the first part.
Okay. So, So it wouldn't. It would be an inconvenience, but not necessarily an undue burden. Is that fair?
Correct, yes, that would work.
I'm going to go back to the. With all due respect, I don't think you'll qualify as an undue hardship. So it was your concern was really just financial and business related. How did you feel when you came down to the government center this morning, or this afternoon, I should say, and kind of saw the fortifications and the environment around downtown right now?
Yeah, it was quite the scene, I guess. It's kind of what I expected.
Okay. You had heard something about these preparations, I assume?
Correct.
Okay. Did it cause you any concern?
No.
Did it make you feel safer?
Actually, it did, yes.
Okay. And then when this afternoon, when we had that initial set of instructions, did you, and the judge was saying that we're doing everything we can to protect your anonymity, how did that make you feel?
Fine.
Okay.
I'm fine.
At some point, however, you understand your name may be released publicly. Does
Correct.
that give you any pause or concern?
No.
Okay. Let me ask you, generally speaking, in your personal or professional life, I suppose with 3 grown children, at some point in your life, you have been called to resolve a conflict between 2 people.
Right.
Okay. Can you think when you have had to, when you've been confronted with that, can you think of how you approach that? What tools do you use to approach a conflict between 2 people, and how do you try to resolve it?
I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. I guess just try and mediate.
Okay, so let's just, I'll put it in a more specific example and less abstract. Let's assume one of your children came to you and said, Dad, this is what happened, and another one came and said, no, this is what happened. Right? There's a conflict inherent between those 2 stories. Agreed?
Okay.
How do you go through, what's the process you go through to determine which side is A, being truthful, and how do you resolve the conflict between your kids?
Right. I guess you just listen to both sides and talk to each one of them and go from there, I guess.
Okay. If you were a juror in this potential case, or you become a juror in this case, the ultimate goal of the juror is to resolve conflict. Agreed?
Agreed.
And there's obviously a very big conflict between the state of Minnesota and Mr. Chauvin, and there's a potential for conflict in the jury room amongst the potential jurors, right?
Yeah, right.
So taking the hypothetical situation into the jury room, right? One group of jurors has a perspective that about a piece of evidence, and a different group of jurors, they don't agree.
Right.
You're kind of in the middle. Let's put you in the middle at this point. How do you reconcile, or what tools would you bring to the table to reconcile that type of a dispute?
I don't know. I guess that's what I just said. Just listen to both sides and kind of see what side I fall on and go with that.
Okay. And so do you think it's like a situation where perhaps there may be other information that would assist in the analysis of whatever that is?
Right.
Or what other people might have to say about that same perspective?
Yeah, that's correct.
I don't want to put words in your
No,
mouth.
it sounds like a reasonable
Okay.
way.
And I guess the question is are you the type of person that's just going to agree with one side to build consensus and get this over with and be done? Or if you have a personal feeling that's strong, are you going to dig your heels in and stand your ground?
No, I'm pretty good at standing my ground if I feel a certain way.
Okay. And do you think you could do that if, let's assume there's this one piece of information. This is the critical key as you see it. And the 11 other people are telling you you're wrong. Do you think you could withstand that type of pressure?
I think I could.
Are you at the same time willing to re-examine your beliefs or your views about that piece of information?
Yeah, definitely.
Can you think of a situation in your life where you've been 100% certain that you are right, only to later learn you're wrong?
I would have to think about that, but not right off the top of my head.
Okay. Can you imagine? I liked the example one person gave of being 100% convinced that an athlete has a particular statistic. You look it up, and it turns out you're wrong.
Right.
And that's a very basic kind of an analogy, right? Has anything like that you think ever happened to you in your life? Or can you picture something like that happening?
I can't think of anything right now.
Okay. Well, let's assume that you were 100% convinced of something, and then someone presents you with this evidence that you're wrong. Are you the type of person that goes, oh, well, big deal? Or are you the type of person that looks at it and goes, well, I need to apply this in some other situation?
Yeah, I mean, if I find out I'm absolutely wrong, then yes, I could deal with it.
Okay. Your job as a potential juror in this case is to be the judge of the facts. What happens? What happened? And ultimately, at the end of the case, you will be asked, or you'll be provided with the law that the judge says is the law in this case. Can you apply the law even if you disagree with it or think that the law should change?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to follow up with some questions about your answers. The questioner asks you about what you knew about the case before you filled it out, right?
Correct.
And you wrote, I've seen a couple of videos from different angles with Chauvin's knee on Floyd. I've heard one of the officers was recently new to the force, don't recall which one. And that's what you wrote. So I guess the question I have is, in terms of the videos in this case, you have seen some various videos about what happened in this incident?
Right. I have not seen a full video. I've seen pieces of various ones.
Okay. So that's what I want to make sure we're talking about the same videos and which videos we're talking about. So you understand that a bystander took a video. That video ultimately went viral on social media and became a news story.
Right.
Have you seen that video?
Yes.
And when you say you've seen that video, did you go onto the internet and download the whole video, or are you talking about clips you've seen in various news
I've
sources?
seen clips. I have not seen the full video.
Now, I am aware that some other videos have gone into the public sector sphere, and there were like body-worn cameras from officers. There were some security or store surveillance videos. Have you seen clips or the entirety of any of those videos?
I don't recall seeing any of those.
Okay. So I guess the question is different angles. Were there other, I guess, bystander videos that you saw?
No, I can only think of one, and that's probably the main one that gets shown or has been shown all the time.
Okay. And you indicated that you had seen, based on your best estimate, some or all of that video, well, parts of that video, I guess we should clarify, 4 to 5 times?
Right.
Okay. And maybe some still images that were taken from that video?
Correct.
Okay. You were asked about your general impression of Mr. Chauvin and Mr. Floyd, and with respect to both, you had a somewhat negative, I guess, general impression of both Mr. Floyd and Mr. Chauvin, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And I just have to follow up. With respect to Mr. Chauvin, you wrote, I've only heard about Chauvin's reputation. What have you heard about his reputation?
I'm trying to recall here. I don't know, that he was kind of a hard ass.
Okay. All right. That maybe there was a reputation of some past incidents.
I already worked at a bar.
Okay. And then with respect to Mr. Floyd, you wrote, I've heard some things about his past. What did you heard about Mr. Floyd's past?
Just drug use.
Okay. Now, you understand if you were to be selected as a juror in this case, would have to judge this case based on the evidence in that's presented in the courtroom. Do you understand that?
Yep.
Okay. And you may have heard some things about Mr. Chauvin's past or Mr. Floyd's past, and that information may or may not come into this trial. Do you understand that?
Yes.
So could you, if you were a juror in this case, the question ultimately becomes, anything you've heard before, can you set that aside and kind of start from zero, right? And judge this case impartially, fairly, on the evidence as it's presented in court?
I definitely can.
You were asked a question about whether you have talked about Mr. Floyd's death with friends, family, coworkers, etc. And you checked that you had, and you wrote, the media seems to try influencing viewers one way or the other. So your perception, correct me if I'm wrong, as I understand this, is that regardless of which position you may take, the media is going to try to bias you one way or another? Is that?
That's the way I feel. Yeah, I'm not big on the news.
Okay. So and you don't watch much news?
No, just weather and sports is about all I tune into.
Okay, fair enough. You were asked a question, do you believe your community has been negatively or positively affected by any of the protests that have taken place in the Twin Cities area since George Floyd's death? And you wrote negatively. Can you explain that?
Well, I guess my community where I live and hang out in probably hasn't, but the Minneapolis community, I'm sure
Okay. So would you agree there's a difference between protests and riots?
Yes.
Okay. Well, how would you describe the difference between the two?
I don't know. It seems pretty self-explanatory, I guess.
Okay.
I'm not big into protests either. I've never participated in one. I never plan on one. I just think riots. I don't get that either. When people destroy their own city.
Okay.
Maybe you could pull up just a little bit.
All right.
So I think what you're saying is that the rioting was negative for the city of Minneapolis, but the protests you just don't really care about?
Exactly right.
Okay. You indicated that you have a couple of friends or clients that are police officers in various cities. Are any of them Minneapolis police officers?
No.
Okay. If you were a juror on this case, the subject of police training may become an issue in terms of the use of force, right? We're going to call up your friends or your clients and say, hey, is this how you guys are trained in X city?
No.
Okay. All right. There's a question, and I just want to remind you, you have the right to request a private hearing, but there's a question about being a victim of a crime or being arrested for a crime. Are you comfortable answering those questions here?
I am without audio.
Without audio? Okay.
All right. I think I know which questions, because you did mark one specifically to be answered privately. And so I am going to find under the rule that this would involve particularly sensitive material, so I'm going to order the audio to be not broadcast, and so that'll be turned off.
Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. All right. On the questionnaire, sir, there were a series of questions where you were asked to rank your opinion, so to speak. There were these statements, and you had to rank your opinion from a 1 being strongly agree to a 5 being strongly disagree.
Okay.
And I just want to follow up on a couple of those statements. One of the questions you were asked was, blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system, and you somewhat agreed with that. Can you answer why you somewhat agreed with that statement?
Well, again, it's something I've seen on the media.
Okay. Do you have...
I'm just going off that, and again, I don't watch that much.
Okay. I mean, do you have any personal experience that would lead you to that conclusion?
No, I don't.
Or any friends who have said, hey, you're not going to believe what happened to me?
Right, no.
You were asked, or the statement reads, police in my community make me feel safe, and you somewhat agreed with that. Do you have concerns about policing or that they're overly aggressive, anything of that nature?
No, I really don't have an opinion on that, I guess. I just...
You don't disagree with it?
Right.
Okay.
I guess I wouldn't know.
Okay. I mean, police in your neighborhood, they patrol your neighborhood, they take care of the neighborhood, and you don't know if they'd make you feel safer?
I kind of live, it's hard, I don't really want to say, but not in a neighborhood.
Okay, gotcha. And you were asked the statement reads, I do not trust the police, and you somewhat disagreed. Is that kind of the same analysis?
Yes.
Okay. You were asked the question, I support defunding the Minneapolis Police Department, and I think that's where you only strongly disagreed with that, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. You were asked a couple of questions about both Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. You checked neutral. You have a neutral opinion of both statements, and there was no answer. I mean, do you have any particular perspectives to share?
Yeah, I really don't have any opinion on either of them. I don't pay that much attention.
And so, sir, just want to make sure that because you did check, the question was asked, do you want to serve as a juror in this case? You checked not sure, and you said, why do you feel that way about serving as a juror? And you said the length of time. Right? But it would be fair to say, I think we've already covered, you can make it work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, begrudgingly, I understand.
Right.
Okay. If I may have a few moments here. Yeah. Pass for cause, Your Honor.
Mr. Slusher.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Juror number 73. I wanted to follow up on some of the questions that you responded to regarding your employment, your self-employment, busy time of year.
Yep.
And the real estate market is pretty good right now.
Yes.
Okay. So if this does end up, if this trial ends up taking a little longer, and would you be surprised if I told you that attorneys are terrible at estimating how long things take?
Right.
Right. I think that to be fair to both sides, we just need to be assured that if we're in a situation where the trial starts grinding on, and maybe it's a little bit longer than you'd hoped, that you would be able to give your full 100% attention to the witnesses who are testifying and the evidence being presented. Would you be able to do that?
Definitely.
Okay. And then when the trial is over, when the government rests and there's deliberations, you know, those might take longer than you would hope as well. And, you know, to be fair to both sides, it's very important that you'd be able to commit that you wouldn't be thinking about the business you're missing. You'd be thinking about what you need to do to reach a verdict in the case.
Right. Yes.
And did you say definitely?
Definitely, yes.
Okay. Thank you. You indicated that your somewhat negative impression of the defendant, of Mr. Chauvin, was based on his reputation.
Reputation, from what I've heard, correct.
And what specifically have you heard? I heard you use the term hard ass, but have you heard anything more specific than that?
No, I really have. Just he worked at a bar and he had an issue with Mr. Floyd, I've heard. I don't know.
When you say he had an issue with Mr. Floyd, do you mean at the bar?
I think so. I don't know.
Okay. And I'm curious as to the source of your information. Was it media? Was it someone who purported to have firsthand knowledge?
No, I'm sure it was media.
And probably just more directly, you've indicated that you have some friends who are law enforcement officers.
Correct.
Was it any of your friends who shared their opinion of Mr. Chauvin's reputation with you?
No.
So it would have been purely a media.
Right.
Okay. How many different law enforcement officer friends, and I want to divide the friends versus clients, because
Yep.
you've mentioned both. I'm assuming you have a lot of clients.
Right. One is probably one of my best friends, and the other two were clients. Basically, just stay in touch with once in a while.
So let's talk about the clients first. You said they were clients.
Past clients, correct. That I'm still in contact with. I stay in touch with my people.
Sure. But of course, changing houses isn't like changing cars. You know, there's not nearly as much turnover. Right?
Right.
And so I'm wondering, just in terms of your current, financial relationship or business relationship with these individuals, they're past clients. You don't have a pending sale with a law enforcement officer.
No.
Okay.
Not at this time.
Okay. So let's talk about the other officer. You say you have one law enforcement officer who's one of your best friends.
Correct.
And you said that this person does not work in the city of Minneapolis, or for the city of Minneapolis.
Correct.
Is it a large department or a small department?
I would say it's large.
In the 7-county metro area?
Yes.
Okay. How long have you been friends with this person?
I first met him as a client about 20-some years ago, and then we just became friends.
Okay. Approximately how often do you see or talk to this person?
I talk to him probably once a week.
Once a week. Do you go over to his house?
No, it's usually phone.
By phone?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you and your friend talked about this case at all?
No.
Your friend has never shared with you any opinion that he or she has about this case? Is it a he
No.
or she?
It's a he.
It's a
no.
he. Okay. What about sort of law enforcement in general? Has your friend talked to you about just policing, what that's like?
No, I haven't in years, but I've gone on ride-alongs with him.
You have. About how many times?
At least twice.
day shift, night shift?
At that time, it was night shift.
What did you think of that experience?
It was interesting. I saw some things.
Yeah? What did you see?
I saw a guy had fallen off his deck and split his head open. Saw that. Saw DUI arrests. Saw someone that had passed.
Sounds like you saw a lot in just a night.
It's a bigger city.
Yeah. What do you think of that as a career path? The job your friend has.
Yeah. It's not for me. Stressful, I'm guessing.
Okay. Can be dangerous.
Dangerous, definitely.
Your friend then, during the course of their shift, they have to exercise judgment, right? And exercise discretion. What are your views on, kind of questioning the discretion that an officer exercises in the field?
Well, from what I've experienced with them 2 times or 3 times whenever I was out, I didn't see anything. Nothing caught me off guard, like, wow, can't believe they're doing that or whatnot.
But I guess what I'm asking you is, in terms of other people questioning an officer's discretion, they have to make decisions, right?
Right.
And sometimes they make decisions, and it could look bad to someone. What do you think about someone who maybe doesn't have the same level of training as a law enforcement officer exercising judgment over the decisions they make?
Right, I get it. They probably don't understand the way things are done and the way they're trained, that kind of stuff.
Do you think that's fair? That someone would?
No, I don't think it's fair.
Has your friend ever expressed to you any concern about kind of the public opinion of police officers in the last year or so? How that's
a little bit, yeah.
Tell me about
just
that.
The way things are going these days. I don't really have any conversations that I can recall. I just remember him saying it's a little different out there than when he first started.
How so?
Just the way things are handled with the media, and everybody has a phone with cameras on it now, and so I just think things are more noticeable these days.
Maybe, literally more under the lens.
Right.
People can take out a phone and record you.
Yep.
And was that a positive or negative reaction that he was expressing to?
I don't think it was either. I think he was just expressing that things are have evolved, I guess, over the years, and they have to be more careful on how they act and say and that kind of stuff.
It's not presenting. Can we sidebar just a schedule?
Yes, Your Honor.
Schedule question.
Friend, the law enforcement officer, about how attitudes have changed. Things are a little bit different now in policing, and they have to be generally more careful. Is that right?
Right.
You were talking about that in the context of cell phone cameras. What about body-worn cameras? Does the department that you're friends with use body-worn cameras?
Yeah, I was saying they have more tools as well besides the general public.
Did your friend express any opinion, positive or negative, about using body-worn cameras?
No, I don't We never talk about that.
So I want you to imagine a situation in which you were selected as a juror on this case, and you had to listen to testimony of law enforcement officers and also of bystanders. And these people that have been seeing the same thing, same events. Do you believe that you would credit the testimony of a law enforcement officer a little bit more than, say, a bystander?
Oh, I don't know. It's a tough question. I guess I would have to see what the. I don't know. I guess I don't know.
And that's kind of hard to think about that in the abstract. But just imagine you're hearing testimony. One person wears the uniform and has the training, and the other person is just simply a bystander on the street. Just knowing yourself as you do, what do you think?
Yeah, well, naturally, I probably believe the police officer more.
And why do you think that is?
Probably because they have more experience and they're trained to deal with whatever's going on rather than the person walking down the street and all of a sudden seeing something happen.
Fair enough. Do you think that, part of your opinion that you might believe a law enforcement officer over that of a bystander could be informed by the relationship you have with your friend?
Maybe. I don't know.
And perhaps some of the experiences that you've had, doing the ride-alongs.
Right. Yeah, possibly.
I'd also like you to just imagine if you're selected as a juror and rendering a verdict of guilty. And then going back and having conversations with your friend. Do you feel that you'd need to maybe explain yourself to your friend?
No, I don't think so.
Well, why not?
Well, I mean, we've known each other 20 years or whatever it's been. I don't think he's going to have a say. I don't think it'd be an issue.
And regardless of whether your friend would, have a say or be an issue, I also want you to just really think about, in the deliberation process, would you yourself think to what am I going to say to my friend? How would I explain to my friend that I returned a verdict of guilty in this particular case?
I would just say that, he wasn't there. He didn't see the evidence. He didn't see the people talking.
And that's how you'd explain it to your friend. I guess I'm wondering if would that be on your mind as you're listening to the evidence, as you're deliberating with other jurors. Would in the back of your mind you be thinking about your friend?
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, probably. I don't think I would be thinking about that.
You'd be able to put him out of your mind and judge the case based on the facts and the evidence?
Well, definitely, yeah.
One moment, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. And sir, if just in your own words, getting back to the financial issues, just in your own words, can you tell us what impact serving on a jury in this case, if the case went, say, 4 to 5 weeks,
Right.
what would the impact be
On,
on you financially?
it would be, I don't want to say devastating, but it would hurt.
Okay. And do you think that you would have to, like, so for example, go into savings to pay bills?
No. I mean, I'm just, in real estate, it's down the road stuff, so I'd be missing a lot of stuff, so it'd be down the road, I wouldn't be getting.
I see. So participating as a juror now, that might cause you a financial hardship
Later.
later.
Later
And-
this year.
Can you give us any sort of idea as to the true impact of that? It's not so much that you then would be concerned about the financial impact at the time, but what I want to know is if you can just estimate for us what type of financial impact that you believe it would have for you.
You want to know an amount about it, or what do you?
Not in so much of an amount, it's more
Right.
like, are you going to be able to pay your mortgage, pay your bills, support
I'll be
your family?
fine.
Okay. All right. Right, Your Honor, need to make a record?
Sure. Sir, I'm going to turn it back to Mr. Nelson for a few questions.
All right.
Just a few follow-up questions on your the relationship with your friend who's a police officer and the testimony of police officers. What we heard you
Example, more likely to tell the truth than not lie.
I believe so.
Okay. I'm going to grant the state's motion under Logan. Sir, you are excused from this jury panel, and so we won't dig into your business for this month.
All right. Thank you.
So thank you for your service and your answers to the
Thank
questions.
you.
Anything else to make a record of after this jury is done? Other topics?
Not on the record, Your Honor.
Okay.
If we could have just a brief chambers meeting for today to talk about some other unrelated matters.
Sure. Let's kind of quickly go over. Mr. Schaefer has sent, I think, the jurors, but we're going to bring in 5 and 4, including the one from today, so we don't have to worry about waiting for everybody to go through the orientation video. That person has already, so we can start right at 9:30. 8:45, we'll do the Zoom hearing with the first 7 jurors who are seated to talk about their exposure to the settlement agreement. And Thursday, I plan on ruling on the May 6th, 2019 incident. Probably won't be a written order by then, but I think will be eventually incorporated into a written order as far as the court's analysis. That's kind of where we're at. So tomorrow 8:45, and I think Thursday at 8:45. All right. Anything else for the record before we have a chambers conference?
Not for the record, thank you.
Mr. Nelson, anything for the defense?
No, yeah.
All right. 8:45 tomorrow. Thank you all. We're in recess.
you.